Our next book in American Roots Music is a book called The Bristol Sessions, Writings About the Big Bang of Country Music. This book was put together by myself and Charles Wolfe. Now, Charles Wolfe was a pioneering scholar. He looked into the stories and into the lives of many, many American musicians and also served to kind of bring the story of American roots music to a general population. He was, in some ways, shall we say, a popularizer of American roots music at a high level, but he was also a very renowned scholar. He always did very careful research, and so it was a real honor to work with him on this project. In essence, the story of the Bristol Sessions was a story that had not been fully explored at the time when we put the book together. There were a lot of rumors, a lot of kind of romanticized myths about the Bristol Sessions, but in essence, we wanted to put the full story, the warts and all approach to the Bristol Sessions. You know, what really happened in Bristol in the summer of 1927? What were the real impacts of those sessions, as opposed to purely the imagined impacts? Because as we found when we put the book together, there had been quite a myth created about the Bristol Sessions, which, you know, frankly is still there. But happily now, at least we have some good factual information with which to work. So we are, in essence, working with a myth and kind of trying to turn it into what we might call serious historiography. We want to have a lot of context in exploring a subject that has been so mythologized. So this is the book that we'll be working with in this section of American Roots Music. This book is, I think, useful because it shows how traditional music and traditional musicians basically walk into a world that is unfamiliar to them at the time when they walk into it, and that's the commercial record industry world. They basically bring their talents that they brought with them from their homes and their lives. They bring their talents into those recording studios and basically create a new medium of exchange, which are commercial records, which then get sold on the open market, and some records sell extremely well and some don't. And all of a sudden, traditional musicians, such as perhaps the Carter family, end up becoming celebrities in the pop music world. It's quite a story, and that's what this book looks into, is how some artists became superstars and frankly influenced a whole genre of music, what became known as country music, while others who had also great talent never had that same trajectory. They walked into the studios, made wonderful records that, alas, did not sell well, and the people went home and carried on their lives, and until we put the book together, frankly, their names were perhaps not recognizable to many people at all. So we're kind of recovering a story here with the book, The Bristol Sessions, but we're also trying to set it into fact, into the realm of fact and provable kind of anecdote, as opposed to the pure realm of myth, which is where, frankly, the Bristol Sessions had been before. Another thing we did with this book, if you folks will look toward the end, there's a chapter on what are known as the Johnson City Sessions, and frankly also the 1928 Bristol Sessions. These are other location recording sessions that are less well known than the 1927 Bristol Sessions, which take up most of the book. But as we basically learned in doing the book, these other location recording sessions conducted not at the same time as when Jimmie Rodgers and the Carter family recorded, this happened later, but were also very important. And so we're very pleased that these other stories are becoming much more widely known and much more important to people. And frankly, that's a good thing, because the true story of American roots music in Appalachia is a very complex one, and it is a story that involves many people and many stories. rather than focusing in on just one story, it's very important to broaden our understanding of Appalachia's contribution to American roots music. And with luck, that's what we accomplished with the book. As you read the book, you'll note that the book combines first-person narratives, kind of more third-person conventional historiography and kind of a historical narrative. You'll also find some curious documents in there, some oral histories. You'll find a variety of perspectives on the Bristol Sessions, and that's quite intentional. The idea is the best way to document things is to go about looking at the topic from multiple perspectives. And frankly, in this class, American Roots Music, when you do your own research project for the required term project or paper, it's also hoped that you'll take a similar sort of approach, combining maybe first-person research, primary research, as we say, where you, in fact, find information about the stories that interest you that has not been perhaps exposed before. Maybe people have not done the interviews or done the oral histories or made the field recordings of a particular artist that you want to study for your research for this class. We certainly would encourage you to participate in the acquisition of that primary research. But also, of course, we want you to account for what knowledge is known that relates to your choice of topic. So perhaps see the Bristol Sessions book as a kind of a model for how to go about doing kind of a holistic approach to doing documentary research into American roots music.